My name's Josh Williams. I'm from Slidell, Louisiana originally. My dad was in the military. We moved around a ton. Been to Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, of course, and originally Louisiana. So it's been an experience. We've moved around a lot and made a lot of friends, and Florida by far has been the best. So starting out, moving around a lot, it was kind of difficult, growing up. I didn't really have a problem making friends, and so that was always a little bit easier aspect, of moving around. But it was always new people, it was always new faces, and so keeping up with what new people and new faces were doing was always something that I guess maybe didn't come natural to me. So I would try and I would overextend to try to make the best of the friends that I could make. And sometimes those friends were great, and sometimes those friends were not so great. There's definitely something to be said for a good core group of people that you hang out with on a consistent basis. And growing up, I never had that. I remember growing up and my family, like growing up, we'd always been in church and heard about church, and weren't really faithful, I like to say like we were church evangelists, we'd go from here to there to there to here, but nevertheless we were there, and so we got little bits and pieces, and I remember growing up playing church, going to my uncle's church. That was really good. He was a pastor, and he would run up and down the aisles, and just it was a good experience. It was a good feel-good experience, but there was nothing there yet in my life that would hold me or anchor me or ground me to the God of that experience. And so I remember one service, he was preaching pretty hard, and I went down front, and he was prophesying, and I thought, there's no way. You're not talking about me, Ever since that moment, I feel like it seems like when something is vocalized, the enemy does as much as he can to try to take that idea away from you. That moment on, life seemed to get harder and harder for me. If it wasn't alcohol, it was drugs. If it wasn't drugs, it was pornography. If it wasn't pornography, it was, sex. If it wasn't that, it just was from one thing to the other to the other. There was a point in my life to where I was at my dad's house, and he put a gun to my head, and he told me that he didn't need a son like me. And so the next day I skipped school, and I broke into my parents' house, and I sat on the couch with his shotgun, and I was waiting for him to come home, and I was going to kill him. For whatever reason, instead of killing him, I grabbed a monkey wrench out of the shed and busted out the back window in his car and stole his car. I was driving down the road, and the cops saw me. I was going to my buddy's house, and the cops saw me, and I saw their cars shake because I knew they were jumping in their cars, and I floored it. And now I find myself running from the cops down US 1 headed toward Jacksonville, and they pulled me over. I had to slow down. They pulled me over. My mom pulled up behind the cops. They put me in the cop car. I remember my mom looking at me, and she said, "I don't even know who you are." And that was the first time somebody said that, "I don't know who you are." The second time was the principal of the school that they finally kicked me out of. When he was talking to me and asking me if I wanted to go to school here, he looked at me and he says, "I don't even know who you are." And that seemed to be the pattern of my life. I was a great manipulator. I was the person that could tell you whatever you wanted to hear and probably make you believe most of what I was saying. but deep down it wasn't true at all. It was all just fake. It was all facade. And that went on for a little while, and I wound up going to a Marine style drill academy, and that was in Tallahassee. I stayed there for 8 months, and within that 8 months they would rehabilitate you, so to speak, and they sent me back out on the street, and things were good for a while. But then after that, I got back into the wrong crowd and the wrong people again, and going into the same old thing time and time again. My mom and dad, believe it or not, my mom and dad wanted to start a bakery. And so me being with the electrical background that I had, they needed some wiring done at their bakery. And so I remember when my mom and dad asked me, they said, because I was still crazy, I was still wild, and they said, look, you can, have you got transportation? I was like, yeah, I can get back and forth. She said, okay, well, we can pay you a little bit, And I said, well, yeah, that'd be great. I've been taking money from my parents. And so I wind up driving back and forth to their bakery and still living wild on the nights. And I remember the freeze plugs blew out in the side of my Jeep Cherokee. And so at that point, I had no place to live. I had no wheels. I had nowhere to go. And my dad came and got me, and he said, well, you can just live with us until the bakery's done. And I remember sitting down on the couch, my mom telling me, they said, now you can't smoke in our house. And I says, Mom, I'm not going to smoke in your house. Why would I smoke in your house? And she said, well, like previously, I don't know who you are. And I says, Mom, I'm not going to smoke in your house. And she said, okay. So I got to the bakery and I started doing the work. My grandfather has been a staple. He saw an opportunity to minister to his grandson through electrical work, through drywall, through ceiling grid, acoustical tile. God is in all that. He's in all and above all and through all. And I remember working with my grandpa, and I know now it was so prophetic. But the electrical was done, and I was sanding on the drywall, and he told me, he says, this is not done yet. He says, you got to keep sanding. You got to get those rough edges off. And so I'm sanding drywall for days. One corner for days. He would come by and he'd say, nope, it's not done yet. And I'd be like, oh, I'd get so upset. I'd get so angry. I'd be like, yes, it's done. I don't feel anything. And he said, no, I can see it's not done yet. And then finally, over at my grandparents' house again, I was talking to my grandmother, working on the bakery. And she invited me to church. And she said, will you go with me? And I said, yes, I'll go with you. And I said, Grandma, I said, I feel like I'm going to get saved tonight. I feel like I'm going to get the Holy Spirit tonight, not knowing anything about it. And she says, she looks at me with this puzzled look on her face. She says, what makes you think you're going to get the Holy Spirit tonight? And I says, I don't know. I just am. I said, Grandma, at this time I was going to the gym and working out and, feeling good about myself. I said, Grandma, I said, I'm doing all this stuff for the outside of my body. But I'm not doing anything for the inside. And she said, okay. And I went to church that night and I gave my heart to the Lord. Fast forward years, I met my wonderful wife. Guys, I went from nothing, living on the floor, to buying a brand new house, to not feeling condemned, to not feeling shamed, to having a wife that loves me, friends that adore me, parents that trust me, a family that loves me, and a church family that's there for me. It's so much better with Christ than without Him. You've heard what the Lord's done in my life. You've heard a little bit about what the Lord's done in my life. And I encourage you, if you don't know Christ, if you don't know him, if you've never heard about him, if you don't have friends that talk about him, if you've never been inside a church, if you've never been in a coffee shop at a Bible study, if you don't know anything, I encourage you to start knowing something. I encourage you to get a Bible. And you say, I don't know where to start. Well, Genesis is a great place. Romans is a great place. Revelation is a great place. You tell me to start at the end. I don't care where you start. God's through it all. He's in every single book of the Bible. He wrote the Bible for us. There's a whole bunch of people back then that told a story that we're walking through today. And so I just encourage you, if you don't know Christ, get to know him. Because your life with him will be so much better than the life you have now. And if you do know him more.